Mrs. Brubaker, and I teach 5th grade at Sarah Moore Green. I am super excited to be here with you today as we look into Unit 3 and we start talking about analyzing data and looking for patterns and relationships. This is one of my favorite units because it's where we really get to take all of the great skills that you've learned and put it all together. And if you remember this, then there was a lot of talk about, corresponding terms and, why one pattern was one way and then the other pattern was the other way. So as we look into this today, we really want to focus in on vocabulary, because if we think about it and we think about the math practices, which remember, the math practices are just the doing part, so what you should be doing as a mathematician, we're really focused in on math practice number 1. So math practice number 1 says that we are able to make sense of problems and persevere in solving them. So you're going to notice that in this particular packet, it's all about the word problem. It's all about, what information do I have? What do I need to know? What are some of the things that I can pull out so that I can successfully answer this? And that's awesome because that's real life. Nobody comes up to you in Target and says, hey, I need you to multiply a decimal times a decimal, and if you can't check out. But real life is word problems. How many bags of candy do I need to get for Easter? How many of these things do I need to have? Just making sure that we are constantly thinking about life in word problems. So before we get into this, I really wanted us to think about vocabulary, since vocabulary is such a big hitter when it comes to word problems. So one of the first things that I want you to think about is the word evaluate. If I'm evaluating something, then I'm thinking about the value of it. I'm really looking at it for how much it is worth. So if you're in my classroom, you already know, I do ridiculous hand motions and things, so just get used to it. I want you right now in your living room, you see I have my 3-year-old's easel right here. This is the nice teaching equipment we have going on in my house. So right now I want you to look at the TV, look at me. Guys, I can't look any more silly anyway, so look at me and say, Miss B, evaluate means to find the value. Okay, so that's the word evaluate. We have expression. I want you looking at me and I want you to say expression. Expression is kind of the fast version. There is no equal sign. So look at me and say, Miss B, expression means no equal sign. Next, we have parentheses. So in this, parentheses are really, really important. And the reason they're important is because if you think back to third grade parentheses came in with that associative property. And it's just that grouping symbol. So look at me and say, Miss B, parentheses means to group. This is going to come into play when we go back and we review PEMDAS, which your parents are going to know that as please excuse my dear Aunt Sally. Yeah, that's where we are. So we're going to talk through a little bit of that because exponents aren't so much of a heavy hitter in 5th grade. But we are really focused in on, important words and those parentheses. So you can look at me. Parentheses means grouping. I want to hear you say it. Parentheses means grouping. Okay? Next we have corresponding terms. So that sounds really fancy, but if I'm thinking about corresponding with someone, that means that I'm kind of relating to them and talking to them. So corresponding terms means that if I have 2 separate patterns, I can go to line 2 in that table and I see on pattern A, this term relates to pattern B's term, and both of these terms are corresponding. So I want you to look at me and say, Mrs. B, corresponding terms are just the terms that have a relationship. Thinking about the word, so we're going to talk about graphing, and graphing really is going to come into play in lesson 23, which is unit 4's packet, but you also need to have it for here because in your particular unit, they're going to ask you about graphing. So we're going to go back and kind of review some of that graphing terminology, and I have some ways that we're going to remember this, okay? So the first thing you need to know is the word origin. So if I'm graphing, we are sitting here, if you remember, in quadrant 1, because in 5th grade, we're only focused on quadrant 1 because we only know positive numbers. We don't know anything about negative numbers. So this word quad, if you think about working out your quads, that's that group of 4 muscles. Think about a quadrilateral. A quadrilateral has 4 sides. Quad does mean 4. And so this is part of a bigger picture that you're going to see, in 6th, 7th, 8th grade when you guys are looking at linear equations and all of that fun stuff. It's really part of this section right here, and there's quadrant 2, quadrant 3, quadrant 4, but we're zoomed in here in 5th grade because all of the rest of these have to do with negative numbers, and you just haven't learned that yet. So as we zoom in, we think about this right here, and you notice even actually when I had all 4, this point stayed the same, and this point is called the origin. So the origin is always 0, 0. And when I think about origin, I think about a couple of things. One of the things I think about is TikTok. You guys are all about the TikTok videos, and if I am making a TikTok video, which don't worry, I won't. If I'm making a TikTok video, then I am not the original. So if I think about original has that word origin in it. The original person was the first person to do that. So I think of this as my start, okay? When I think about origin, I also kind of think about my birthplace, okay? You might think about, where were you born? I was born in Tulsa, Oklahoma. So my origin is Tulsa because that's where I got my birth certificate and things like that. So I kind of think through those things as your origin is kind of your start too, okay? So as we look at origin, we're thinking about it's our starting point. Right here it's 0, 0. It's pretty much always going to be 0, 0. You may start somewhere different, but if they're talking about the origin, they're always talking about 0, 0. So the other thing that we need to make sure we're clear on is the x-axis, which is that horizontal line, and the y-axis. Okay, so now I need you to remember something. This is us zoomed in on quadrant 1, okay? So next year things are going to be a little bit different, and that's okay because there are 4 quadrants and you need to know that. But because we're zoomed in here, I thought one of the ways that I taught my students to kind of remember, hey, which direction do I move, is we looked at the Cupid Shuffle because I'm kind of old school like that. So we're going to take a moment, we're going to talk through the Cupid Shuffle, and I'm going to horrendously sing over this, so you're welcome. Are you ready? Okay. Oh, I'm going to start that one more time, so we are ready. Right, to the right, to the right. That's the X, that's the X, that's the X, that's the X. Now up, now up, now up, now up. That line is the Y. That line is the Y. Okay. So let me recap that because that was a little rough. But if I am moving to the right, to the right, to the right, to the right. That's the X, that's the X, that's the X, that's the X. Now up, now up, now up, now up. That line is the Y. That line is the Y. Again, that'll change next year because you might go left and you might go down. But just as a quick reminder, and singing the Cupid Shuffle in your brain, we're moving to the right, that's the X, and then we're moving up because that line is the Y. And that's how you move every single time, because in an ordered pair always starts with X and second is Y. That to me is kind of easy to remember because I remember in the alphabet, X comes before Y. So just thinking through that. Okay, so now that we've gone through that massive amount of vocabulary, I think we're ready to really dig in here and think about some of the skills that are going to help you on this packet this week. Okay, so the first thing that I want us to do is I want us to evaluate an equation, and we're thinking through this using PEMDAS. So again, exponents aren't going to be as important because in 5th grade, we really focus on exponents when we think about powers of 10. And that's pretty much all we do with exponents is just understanding our base 10 system. And I know that's a review from your very first packet, but that base 10 system and just kind of what that looks like. So what we're going to do now is we're going to think through this problem. Okay, so I have this problem, and if I think about PEMDAS, and I'm going to write it like this, because as you hopefully remember, Multiplication and division, it's just whichever one comes first. Addition and subtraction comes after multiplication and division, but again, it's just whichever one comes first. Those can be totally switched, which is why sometimes this can be a little confusing. So these are those parentheses. These are those exponents. We've got multiplication or division and addition or subtraction. Okay, so as I look at this and I evaluate, remember evaluate just means to find the value. And this is an expression because I don't see an equal sign. So as I think through this right now, I'm looking at it and I notice the very first thing I see is I see these parentheses. That's that grouping symbol that says, hey, this is the most important. And because it is the most important, we're going to look at it and we're going to think through. Okay, so within that parentheses, since I know I'm starting there, inside of that parentheses, I notice that I have no exponents. And I look here, multiplication or division. Well, I see that multiplication sign, so that means that I'm starting inside of here, but I'm really starting with this right here. Because I'm only taking care of some of the parentheses, I'm going to do this part, but I'm going to keep that parentheses so in my brain I don't forget, oh, hey, Miss Brubaker, you need to remember this -1 over here, okay? So I have 4 plus, I'm just going to copy this down. I'm going to keep my parentheses. 3 times 2 is 6. -1, keep my parentheses. So I do this step by step by step. Now your parents, they know how to do this. They can zoom through it, so they might skip some steps. And if you're really good at this and you know how to skip those steps, like, you go for it. So as we think through this, I'm still in my parentheses. So I'm going to go ahead, and this is the part that I'm going to do. It's okay that subtraction is after addition. That doesn't matter. What matters is that it's inside of the parentheses. Now, if there weren't any parentheses here, then I would have done addition first, because addition and subtraction, they're on the same line, and in this particular expression, addition came first. Okay, so 6 minus 1 is 5, and I'm going to bring down my 4 plus, well, we all know 4 plus 5 is 9. So if I evaluate that expression has a value or a worth of 9. Just kind of keeping those things in your brain. Like I said, the nice thing is your parents already know, please excuse my dear Aunt Sally, so you have, all the tools you need, hopefully. Awesome. Okay, we're going to move into our second problem, and a lot of these problems that I'm doing, they are actually word problems, so we're going to kind of talk through them, and I'm going to think through kind of what we did. But as I do this, in my classroom, it's really important that we read through problems multiple times. And I'm sure in your classroom is the exact same thing, guys. So I'm going to read through this problem. And as I read through it, the first thing we're going to think about is just what is the problem about, having nothing to do with math. I don't want to think about math. I don't want to think about numbers. I just want to know what's happening in the problem, okay? So one of the strategies I use is to have my kids close their eyes. Feel free to do that. Nobody's judging you. I mean, I can't see you, so do whatever feels comfortable. All right, so it says, Maria and her friend go to a movie. At the snack stand, they each get a drink that costs $5 and a popcorn that costs $8. Maria pays for her friend. How much does Maria pay altogether? So as I think through that word problem, I'm really sitting here and I'm thinking about going to the movies. It's been a long time, guys. I don't know about you. So if I think about going to the movies and buying the popcorn, and she bought a drink and she went with her friend, that's what's happening in this word problem. It's a very real life problem, and she just needs to make sure, hey, I have enough money to pay for everything. Okay? So we're going to read through it again, and we're going to kind of pull out some of those really important pieces here. So it says, Maria and her friend go to a movie. At the snack stand, they each get a drink that costs $5 and a popcorn that costs $8. Maria pays for her friend. How much does Maria pay altogether? Okay, so thinking through this right here, I'm going to start by drawing a picture because that's just kind of how my brain works. I just am a very visual. I need to see it, okay? So as I go through this, we know that we are making sense of problems and persevering it. So we've made sense of it. We've really thought through, okay, well, what's happening here? And I'm going to just kind of put it here. I know it's a little hard for you to see, but I'll keep going through it with you, okay? So we have Maria. You get to enjoy my stick figures. You're welcome. So this is Maria, and she's going to the movies with her friend. Again, not an art teacher. You guys can probably do much better than I can. Okay, so this is her friend. So they're going to the movies, and at the snack stand, it says they each get a drink that costs $5. So I'm going to draw this nice little drink here, and this is $5. And he also gets a nice little drink, and it is $5. So each of them gets a drink for $5. That only seems fair. Then it says, and they both get a popcorn. Alright, so it's my version of popcorn. And the popcorn costs $8. Okay? Maria is paying for her friend, so they want to know how much is she going to have to spend. So the question is, how much money does she need? Okay? We're thinking through that. How much money is Maria going to need? So as I think about that, I'm going to kind of put parentheses around this because I can kind of group it. She's going to buy a popcorn and a drink for 2 people. Okay? So I could think about this as, 5 plus 8 plus another $5 plus another $8. I could kind of think through that. Or if I wanted to bring in that multiplication, I could really say, well, how many people are there? How many drinks am I buying? How many popcorn? If you said 2, give me an air high five because you were right. So I'm really thinking through this as 2 times $5 for the drink plus $8 for the popcorn. And if I think through that, I go back to PEMDAS, okay? And PEMDAS, or please excuse my dear Aunt Sally, is all about parentheses first. Well, I put this in parentheses because I was able to group it. It made sense to group it, okay? That's evaluating what we're being asked here. So if I go here and I'm inside of the parentheses, I think 5 plus 8. Well, 5 plus 8 is 13. And you're going to remember, hopefully, from class that this looks a little weird, doesn't it? But it's really how you're going to start to see a lot of expressions, especially in algebra, from this point forward, okay? So this, if you remember, means to multiply. If that's confusing to you, you can always write it like this. Okay? It doesn't matter. They mean the exact same thing. So if I think now 2 times 13, well, 2 times 13 is 26. I need to be thinking, though, as in money. So she is going to spend $26 in order to get her friend and herself some popcorn and a drink. Okay. We are going to move from that problem, so should be a whole lot like what you're seeing, into evaluating an expression, because we need to also make sure that you're able to take some words and make some sense of those words. All right. So we have this expression here. Again, you won't be able to see it super well, but I'm going to read it multiple times. It says, write a numerical expression to represent the following phrase. Okay? And it says 15 minus the sum of 6 and 7. So I really need to be able to recall that vocabulary of sum, product, difference, quotient. I need to be able to remember sum means the answer to addition. Difference means the answer to subtraction. Product is the answer to multiplication. And quotient is the answer to division. So as I think through this, 15 minus the sum of 6 and 7, that's really interesting. I'm going to do this 2 ways. The first way, again, I'm going to draw it because I told you, I am such a visual person. Like, I've just got to draw everything out, okay? So if I think about it, I start with 15. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'm going to draw an array here just to make things easier. And I'm also going to show it with numbers, which is kind of the second strategy. Some of you can go ahead and skip to the second strategy. And if you can do that, that's awesome. If you can't do that, join me and draw it. That's what I would do. Okay, 15 minus. Well, I know the minus sign, that's subtraction. Okay, so minus. The sum. If it's the sum, it means it's the answer. The only way that I would add before I would subtract is if it's in parentheses, which means it's grouped together. So in order to get the sum, in order to get the answer, I'm going to actually have to put that parentheses around it. And I'm going to say 6. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 plus, because sum is the answer to addition. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, so as I think through this right here, I see the sum here is 6 plus 7, and the sum would be 13. So if I were to answer that, if I were to write the expression, it would actually be the 15 minus 6 plus 7. But just to get a recap of that evaluating, what I'm going to do is go back to PEMDAS, think back through, parentheses are first, okay? Well, 6 plus 7 is 13. The sum of 6 and 7 is 13. So if I say 15 minus that sum, if I were to evaluate it, I would still get 2. If you were thinking that in your brain, if you were helping me out with that, give me an air high five. Nice job. Okay. We're going to look at one more problem. And this problem really ties in quite well to what you all are going to be doing in your packet this week, really thinking through what it means to draw a table to evaluate multiple things at one time, okay? So we have my friend Maria again. She is, she went to the movies, now she's going somewhere else. We're going to read through this word problem. Remember, the first time we read through it, I don't want you thinking at all about the math. I just want you to think about what's happening in real life, okay? Because we're going to be more successful with that if we are able to think through that, okay? All right, so we have this problem, and it says, Maria is working at the snack stand at a basketball game. Each frozen yogurt costs $3, and each sandwich costs $6. Create a table to show the costs for buying 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 frozen yogurts. Create another table to show the costs for the same number of sandwiches. How does the cost of a given number of frozen yogurts compare to the cost of the same number of sandwiches? Okay, so already a little overwhelmed. There's a lot going on in that problem, but if I go back to the basics and what's happening in real life, I can think through this problem and I see, hey, you know what? She is at a snack stand at a basketball game and she is selling yogurt and she is selling sandwiches, okay? So we're going to go through this and we're going to really start thinking about what it's asking. The first thing that it says is it tells me this. It says that each frozen yogurt costs $3 and each sandwich costs $6. Create a table to show the cost of buying 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6 frozen yogurts. Okay, so I'm just going to think froyo. So I'm making a table, and a table is going to look like this. It says 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I'm just pulling the information out of the text, okay, really using my text evidence here as your reading teacher would want you to know. And I'm going to think, if this is how much I buy, what's the cost of froyo? Okay? Well, it says that the frozen yogurt costs $3 each. So if I buy 0 frozen yogurts, I've spent $0 on froyo. That makes sense, okay? If I buy 1, I spend $3. If I buy 2, well, that's $3 plus another $3. Okay, well, that's $6. If I buy 3, it's 3, 6, 9. 4, 3, 6, 9, 12. 5 would be 15, and 6 would be 18. I think you've got the pattern kind of going on here, okay? So we have this table to show froyo. It says create another table to show the costs for the same number of sandwiches. Okay, so if instead of froyo, or maybe with my froyo, I want a sandwich, I'm going to say 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. All right, and each of my sandwiches cost $6. Okay, so if I buy 0 sandwiches, I've spent 0 amount of money. If I buy 1 sandwich, if every single sandwich is $6, I spend $6. 2 would be, well, 6, 12. 3 would be 6, 12, 18. What would 4 be? You said 24, you own it. Okay, what would 5 be? 30, and then last but not least, you're right, 36. Okay, so it says, how does the cost of a given number, so we've created our tables, and it says, how does the cost of a given number of frozen yogurts compare to the cost of the same number of sandwiches? Okay, so I'm going to kind of remove this, And if I were thinking through this, I would kind of combine all of these pieces because I think it would be the easiest. So I'm going to keep, this is the same in both of my graphs, so I'm going to write it 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then I'm going to think through frozen yogurt and a sandwich, okay? So if I buy 0, I've spent 0 on both of them. I'm just going to really fill this in. Didn't leave myself enough room, but froyo is going to go here and sandwich will go here. Okay, so 0, 3, 6, 9, 12, 15, and 18. And I'm going to fill this in here. So 0, 6, 12, 18, 24, 30, and then 36. Okay, so what it's asking me to do is to compare this. So what I'm doing is I'm looking at corresponding terms. Corresponding terms are the two terms that are kind of on the same line, okay? So if I buy one froyo, I spend $3. If I buy one sandwich, I spend $6. So how could I get from 3 to 6? Well, there are a couple of ways. I could add 3. I could multiply by 2. So thinking through that, I wonder if there's going to be a pattern that happens. So from 6 to 12, well, I can't add 3 because 6 plus 3 is 9. But if I multiply by 2, well, that seems to work here. It also works here. Let's see if it works for the rest of them, because if it does, that's going to be our pattern. 9 times 2 does equal 18. 12 times 2 is 24. 15 times 2 is 30. And 18 times 2 is 36. So if I want to go back to the question where it says, how does the cost of a given number of frozen yogurts compare to the cost of the same number of sandwiches? What I'm really seeing is that it's double, okay? So for every frozen yogurt that I buy, if I multiply it by 2 or I double it, then I am going to pay that price for the sandwich. That's kind of that corresponding terms, that's the relationship that is happening. And very last but not least, I have misplaced my rag, which in my classroom, this would be the complete and total norm, okay? So what we're gonna do here is I'm gonna take some graph paper that I have. We're going to kind of graph and look at this. If I am thinking through this, okay, and I know, again, this graph is a little difficult to see, we should see that positive correlation happening, okay? So I'm saying 3 and 6 for my first one, and I'm getting that ordered pair by taking these corresponding terms and turning them into an ordered pair. So 3, 6, the next one will be 6, 12, okay? So on and so forth. So if I see 1, 2, 3, and then up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It's my very first one, okay? Start at the origin, then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10, 11, 12. And I am noticing that trend is happening, okay? So able to move to the right, that's the X. Moving up, that's the Y. Thinking through all of those things, you should be super successful this week. I hope that your teachers are able to help you. I can tell you from the bottom of our hearts, we miss you. We miss being in class with you. We love you and think that y'all are awesome. So I hope you have a wonderful week and talk to you soon.